Council public hearing, July 17, 2017. First item on the agenda is the public hearing to consider the proposed 2018 tax budget. And that would be, I believe, Harlita, Councilwoman Herbie.
Yes. I'll let Harley take it.
Well, this is just a housekeeping issue. It is what we have to do in order for us to levy our property tax for the 2018 calendar year. It doesn't reflect anything abnormal. We don't have anything exciting to tell you, which is great for us. It is reflective of our 5-year financial plan in that we took it from the prior year, made very little adjustment to it in presenting it to the county for us to levy our property tax. And I'm available for any questions.
Okay, are there any questions for Finance Director on the public hearing? Any questions from council? Councilwoman Herbie?
It just occurred to me, normally we tweak these every year. Was there anything that we tweaked this year?
Substantially, what we do is there's a high level of capital improvement inside of it. We typically roll it back to what is our standard practice, because I think in the out years, there's normally 3 to 4 million extra of wishes and wants. So the wishes have been removed. It's back to what we would start as a beginning draft. Things that were recurring from year to year that are capital, we left them in. The one-time hits have been removed, and they were easy to mark as itemizations. And we were able to balance out everything after we took out all the wishes.
Okay.
When you say one-time hit, can you tell me what you're speaking of?
It's a capital improvement that is a one-time improvement. When we pave a road, it's a one-time event. Typically, we don't have to pave that same spot again for multiple years. You have that recurring expense, but hopefully it's moving to a different location.
Also, when you do that throughout the city, that's the piece that changes because it goes from different parts. Okay.
Correct. So like our road program, we tried to keep that in because that's a recurring capital event. But when we buy like the ladder truck, that's a one-time event that happens once every 10 years, 10 to 12 years. So that one will be removed as an expenditure for that particular year, making it easier for us to balance.
Which the second one you gave me an example of?
That's the one-time event.
That's the fire truck.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Anything else? Does anybody from the audience have any questions for the Finance Director? Or any comments from anyone from the audience? If we have no comments, hearing none, we'll declare the first public hearing adjourned. The next one is in about 10 minutes. Call to order, City of Forest Park Council public hearing. 745 public hearing is to consider amendments to Chapter 150 land usage of the City of the Forest Park Code of Ordinances as they relate to Ohio Medical Marijuana Control Program. Mr. Anderson.
This one.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Chris Anderson. I'm the Director of Community Development for the City of Forest Park. During this presentation, I'm going to be referring to a memo I wrote that contains a map at the back. If anyone doesn't have that, I have some extra copies. Pass this down.
Where's the map?
It came in over email, to the council email.
I didn't get it then.
I think, as most of you know, because we've reviewed this a couple times since last December, Ohio passed a limited medical marijuana control program. Went into effect September 8th of 2016. In December, our city council passed a moratorium on any new establishments or any businesses, existing businesses entering into this line of business. And we're currently still in that moratorium. During that time, we began to review our codes, as well as what other communities were doing, what the state agencies that were charged with rulemaking were also doing. And then we began reviewing this with the Planning Commission in April. The Planning Commission reviewed and discussed this, provided guidance to me in April and May, and then we reviewed a draft ordinance at the June Planning Commission meeting, and the Planning Commission made a recommendation for the change to the zoning. Just to review, the provision of medical marijuana in Ohio is going to consist of 4 kinds of establishments. There are cultivators that grow the plant, and I'll just note that that's not out in the field, but it is inside in a secure building. Processors that turn the plant into things like oils, edibles, patches. And then testing laboratories, they will test and certify the safety and effectiveness of the finished product, and dispensaries. And those are the retail outlets where someone that has a prescription can obtain the medical marijuana products. Just note that it can only be prescribed for the treatment of certain medical conditions, and I have those listed in my memo, but there's about 24 of them. And it actually prevents smoked marijuana. It has to be in a form that is either for consumption or for vaporization or as a patch, as I mentioned earlier. The main thing for local communities with this new legislation is to make decisions on how we want to zone them. And again, this is 4 different types of establishments. One thing that the state legislation does provide is that none of these can be located within 500 feet of a school, church, public library, public playground, or a public park. And that's where I'm going to refer to the map. That actually takes out a significant portion of our commercial areas as being ineligible for locating one of these facilities. That area with the crosshatch those are all areas that are within 500 feet of one of those listed facilities. I have certain areas circled on the map. One is the Northland Industrial Park in purple on the right. At the top, you have the Winton and I-275 area, which includes the mall, Omniplex, and portions of Parkwood Plaza and Chase Plaza. And then finally, the Crossways Industrial Park on the west side, also in purple. When the Planning Commission reviewed the different types of facilities, we are reasonably certain that the cultivation and processing and testing lab facilities are going to be, number one, operating under some fairly strict rules by the state. They're limited in number, and they're going to be distributed throughout the state. So in our metro area, we can only really expect maybe 1 or 2 of each of these to locate anywhere. So they may not come to Forest Park at all. If we do have a building or site that would be eligible for one of these, though, it is legitimate economic development to have one. I mean, it's going to be a secure facility, good paying jobs, and really an absence of nuisance that we could determine. So the first of these recommendations is that for processors, cultivators, and testing labs, that they be classified as a special exception in the manufacturing and industrial park districts. And I'll refer just again back to the map. Those would be the areas on the left and right in the circles in purple. Crossways is zoned industrial park district, and Northwood Industrial Park is zoned manufacturing district. As you may know, retail dispensaries have been really the hot topic in looking at this legislation and what local communities are grappling with in terms of permitting them. Originally, on the staff recommendation, we had recommendation to simply prohibit them in all districts, which the state legislation does provide for, and other communities have done. The Planning Commission spent probably the majority of time discussing this particular question, and their consensus was that people that had a prescription for this in Forest Park residents ought to have at least the opportunity to be able to obtain the products in a reasonably nearby location. And so I think the Planning Commission felt fairly strongly that we should provide a place where these could be permitted. Referring one last time back to the map, most of our shopping centers are not, they're within 500 feet of one of the restricted facilities like a church, a school, or park. So areas like North Point and Forest Park Plaza no one could locate there, regardless of our zoning. Same thing goes for Promenade and Forest Park Square across the street here. Also Civic Center and Plaza on the west side. What you're left with is the Winton and I-275 area, which is a portion of Parkwood Plaza, except for Walmart. And then Chase Plaza, where we have Spring Hill Suites, a couple of automotive repair facilities, and Cracker Barrel. And then north of the interstate, Omniplex and Forest Fair Village. Planning Commission recommended that this be allowed as a special exception in the planned business district for areas north of I-275. That parallels the restriction that we have on new bars and lounges, which are also required to be north of I-275. They went a little further and recommended a restriction, which is that it must be in a freestanding building, freestanding single-use building on its own lot. And that would be to minimize or prevent any conflicts or incompatibilities with other businesses. And finally, that the construction of such a facility would be reviewed under the development plan process by the Planning Commission, regardless of its size. Under the regular zoning, certain establishments, if they're undergoing renovation or below a certain threshold, don't have to go through the development plan, but this would in any size. That use would be prohibited in the rest of the planned business district and also in all other zoning districts. One final element of the recommendation, and this is more on the housekeeping side, would be to add definitions for medical marijuana and the medical marijuana control program that reference the Ohio Revised Code sections implementing that program. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Anderson? Mr. Barnes?
So just for clarity, when we say special exception, that basically means an application would have to be rendered to prove that the company or entity is consistent with the goals of this particular program.
That's correct. It
It's
would be
extra.
individually reviewed
Right.
at such a time as we received an application.
So there's another layer of scrutiny outside of your normal build application.
Yes.
And if I'm reading this, just for clarity just for clarity, really what we're saying is that cultivation, processing, and testing is kind of the area that we would be most interested in participating in, because when you listen to the restrictions in the dispensary, the likelihood of a build in an independent freestanding building in the areas in which we're indicated is very unlikely. I mean, there's not a whole lot of land in those areas to develop on.
That's true. They are mostly built out, but of course, we're looking to see the mall be redeveloped at some point. And there is still one outlet left in the Omniplex development, that it's in front of the former Kmart.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from anybody? Councilwoman?
Omniplex being,
Yes,
the
sorry?
Omniplex area being, what areas of?
Oh, we're Home Depot, Steak and Shake, CarMax.
There's a little bit of a land there.
Right. There's about a 1.5 acre lot still available.
And that would be considered?
It would be an eligible site.
Be a what, please?
It would be a site that someone could make an application to do that
Okay.
on.
Mr. Hodges?
Can you just explain, do they have to build a new building or just be in a freestanding building?
No, they don't have to build a new building. But there are no empty buildings available at this time.
Well, Kmart facility as an example.
Okay.
If,
Kmart's a
yeah,
freestanding building.
it's,
The whole building.
yeah, they couldn't be in there with nobody else.
Correct.
If they, they put it in Kmart, they can't rent any of that building to anybody else. It's got to be just them and them alone.
And that building's under contract, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. We,
Kmart building.
But they'd have to buy it.
Yeah, they have to buy it from the current owner.
well, the Planning Commission just, earlier this month, reviewed a special exception for a family entertainment center there. So that's, we expect to be occupied by the end of the year.
The one at Kmart?
Yes.
Mayor, last point, I was only trying to make certain that we understood that there are facilities there that they could go, even though there are existing businesses there, businesses change.
Right.
And so the idea that, well, there's no other place that they'll go, you know, just to be clear, they just need a freestanding building.
Any other questions from anybody else? Any questions from the public? Mr. Anderson? Hearing none. At this point, with no more issues or questions,